Well, hey everyone, welcome to today's Articulate training webinar. Today we are looking at Articulate Localization for storylines. So we're just focusing on the process start to finish and storyline. So we're doing the storyline only session just to give a little bit more attention to some of the nuances in storyline, things you can do like customizing media, swapping out audio and video files. So we're just going a little deeper in storyline, then we have a separate session just on Rise. Now this is the first time we've recorded this session or we're doing this session, so we'll have a recording link sent out to you after today's session. You'll probably get that tomorrow morning. But there's a resource page that we'll share with you as well. It'll have the resources as well as the recording. Now, it's a pretty large group here today, so that's pretty neat. But I do have a bunch of folks helping me out in the back channel, so just feel free to answer or ask questions along the way. They'll do their best to keep up with all of you. Sometimes we just can't get to all the questions. So first thing I would suggest is just to jump into the community at eLearning Heroes. Ask your question there, and we'll do our best to follow up with you after the session. And then second, but if best you can, keep your questions related to localization for storyline. That'll just help the folks helping me out in the back channel kind of prioritize their responses. We do have a separate session on Rise, and you can ask all the Rise questions there. But they're probably not going to say no, but there's going to be a lot of questions. So best you can, try to keep it focused on storyline. All right, with that, I'm just going to jump in. We're just going to get right into storyline here. A couple things that we'll do before we get started, and that is we really want to just set up localization. So this is going to happen in your browser. So very similar to what you would do with Rise. So I'm in my 360 account dashboard, and what I want to do is come all the way over here to the far right and select my profile icon, and then what I'm going to do is just drop down and choose account. So just a couple things that we want to do to make sure that everything is set up here for localization as set up for your team and who has access to it, as well as give you an idea of what you have for credits and managing the overall process. So the first thing is we'll come into Manage Team, and not the Manage Team, sorry, we're going to say Manage Subscription. Right, that's the one we want to look at. And if I scroll down right here, you can see localization. So a couple things that we can see right here is we can see, our credits. So we see 17 out of 10,000 translations, or however many translations you have. Another really neat feature here is you can download the usage report. So I'll just let you download a report of all the translations that you've translated, and just gives you a good bird's eye view of everything that you've done with localization. So at least how many credits you're using, who's using, what courses have been translated. But you may want to download that usage report from time to time. The other thing we look at here is, I'm going to come back up to Team, because that's what I wanted to look at next, and you can see who on your team has access to localization. Now this is important because localization, unlike Articulate 360, it uses credits, which means every time you translate a new course, you're going to use a credit. So you may not want to enable everyone on your team to have access to localization. So I could come in and click Manage Permissions here for Ellie, and maybe I don't want localization on for her. I could add her to a different group. I just have the ungrouped version, but if I wanted to create a different group, I could do that. Manage admin controls for each if I want to give her those options as well. But I may not want everyone on the team to have localization. I want Ellie to have it, so I'm going to click close here. Close without saving. But take a look at who has access on your team, and that'll give you an idea of who has localization, because if folks have it and they're just playing around with it, that's going to use up your credits a little bit quicker. You may want that in the initial during the trial, that's totally fine, but once you get going, you may want to just reserve the localization options for just a couple folks on your team, just to better manage and work with your credits. Okay, lastly, we'll come back down to Manage Subscription, and I want to show you probably the most important thing to do, and this is going to be true whether you're working in Rise or Storyline, and that is your glossary feature. So what this means is you can add a custom glossary for different types of courses. We can have multiple glossaries, which means you may have certain terms that are used for different industries or different, maybe international customers or clients that you're working with, and not all the same terms need to be can really fit nicely into a single glossary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a glossary here. So let's just toggle over to Let's find that here. Desktop and localization and glossary. So here's the default glossary. I'm going to open this default glossary that you have. So you get one when you first start. And so the idea right here is we're just giving you an idea of how this works. So what you'll see up top, we probably could zoom in just a little bit here. So up top you have the language code, and we provide all of these on the glossary resource page that you have that links to on that. Real quick, just so you see it. Right, we link right here to glossary documentation, and that just shows you all the codes. But the codes are important because it's going to tell you, you're telling the glossary how do you want to translate certain words in each of the languages. So you can see Japan, Danish, Spanish, but you might have words like company terms, Articulate 360. I don't want that translated. That's a company or a product name, so I want that to be the same. And you notice how it's pasted, it's copied the same across all of the cells. However, you may have words like animation effect, and then you want to make sure that that is translated a specific way. So you just add the specific translation here for each of the languages that you're working with, and then you can ensure that when the AI localization goes through, it doesn't touch those words, and it just gives you that much more accuracy and control when you do that initial localization. Now, a couple things though, as you go through this, AI is doing that first pass, and then you'll have your validators come in. One thing to think about is really your glossary. Treat this as an evolving document. If you notice that certain words are just not being translated the way you want them to be translated, add them to your glossary, and then re-upload that glossary and overwrite it. So this is not a static document. You're going to use this, update it, and as you're working with your specific projects and terms and phrases and industry words, you may want to continue adding those to the document. Now I don't need to save this, but I also have a couple other documents here, glossaries. I've got one maybe for some of my European clients, and I also have a company glossary here for Articulate. So you can add multiple glossaries and then select the glossary when you localize your course. So for example, I'll just say add a glossary, and I'm going to call this one Articulate Company, which means these are going to be keywords that are just really related to Articulate software products and company terms. Go ahead and find that file. Glossary and Articulate, just so you select it. You can see everything in there, and I'll go ahead and open that and add the glossary. It'll take a moment here to get it. What I'm going to do though at this point is, after I've added multiple glossaries, is I'm going to make sure to select one or the other for the projects that I'm working on. Now, meaning that what's my default glossary, but when I go into publish a course, I can still select the specific glossary. And you can see the terms here. I've got different languages selected for each of these, and I also have different how many terms I'm translating, and then you can see obviously the date that those are being added. Those were added. So that's how you can add glossaries. You can continue adding, as many glossaries really as you need. But think about it as, maybe your general courses for your organization, but then if you're also translating for different customers or different organizations across the world, maybe you have different terms that are related to them. So that's a good conversation to have with your customers. All right, that's really all there is for setup right here. I'm going to go ahead and just minimize this and jump into Storyline. Now, lastly, before we get started and just translating this, there are a couple things that we're going to want to look at really for just setting up our files. You don't have to do this. You could just localize your course and go through the process, and then as you go through and validate it, you'll kind of see these nuances, things that are happening with your course. But if you do this ahead of time, it's just going to be that much easier. Now, in Storyline, though, one thing to think about is some of the things I'm going to show you are kind of counterintuitive. They kind of go against how we used to teach Storyline. So things like fixed text box sizes. Wait a minute! I thought we had scroll bars, and those are all accessible, and that's what we want. Well, we do, but when we're working with translating courses, we want to kind of create these fixed sizes that allow us to really specify what a size is available for each language. It's going to save you a lot of time when you go through. So I'm just going to show you this real quick, and then we'll get a better idea when we localize the course. So first off, a couple things. Capitalization. You don't want to capitalize terms. That's treated a little bit differently. It tends to be thought of as a as an acronym in translation. So you want to, as much as possible, remove any capitalization that you may have used for emphasis. So we'll say reduces stress. So that's one right there. The other big one, and I know this happens a lot more in Storyline obviously than it does in Rise, and that is separating text boxes, having multiple text boxes for the same sentence or idea. So right here you see how we have the studies show, and then we come in here for each of our bullet points, which I believe, yeah, so they're just animating in here by paragraph. We don't really want to separate these because when AI translation goes that first pass, it's going to see these as a separate idea or a thought, and it won't have that same context connected. So the better idea would be to select those and then delete it, and then I'll come in and I'm going to add them to this paragraph. Now, I wanted those to be animated, and here's a big update. I think in the last month or maybe two. Originally, we were telling you not to animate by paragraph, and what I mean by that is, let's just turn off animation, turn it back on, and then there's this option down here by paragraph. And what does that mean is that instead of treating everything as a single text block, which is what we'd see right here, you see if I fade this in, it all comes in together, just fades in. If I treat this as paragraph, it means that each line break becomes its own animated text box. So it kind of treats these as individual text boxes, but it's all still within a group. So you can see right here I have the studies, and then, I mean, I'm not listening to the audio right now, but I'm going to bring this one over because I know right about there is where it says boost productivity, and then I can have enhances performance, and then finally reduces stress. So now when I have these, notice how when I come in, there's 1, 2, and then 3, right? So I have the same effect I had from multiple text boxes. However, now I have it all in one. And you can do that with the most recent update version of Storyline. So you have access to that. Actually, just to be safe, I'm going to do a save as, and I'll call this one my working file. That'll make it a little bit easier to, just in case we run into any issues here. So just give me one moment, and I'll say let's say working. Okay, so that just gives me a backup version just in case anything happens. All right, so that is mostly it for setting up. You can do the animation by paragraph, avoid capitalization. Oh, one last thing it's important here, and this will help with your translations as well, is just making sure that your grammar is correct. I know that's something we all focus on as course designers, but the more correct the grammar, the more active voice your writing is in, then your AI translation is going to be that much better. It's just easier for it to really interpret what your language is. So if you have AI Assistant, a great thing to do is just select the text and do a quick grammar check on it as a final pass. Now, you probably have doing this all before you, wait, did it just freeze on me? What happened here? Just a second. Looks like something just locked up. But the reason being is you most likely are doing that, however you're working, whether it's in Google Docs ahead of time or you're doing it in Storyline. I'm sure you're all doing that as a final step before you start building your course. But again, it doesn't hurt to run a quick spelling and grammar type or pass through on your content. So it looks like I am frozen. Just give me a second. I don't know what's going on. Awkward moment. Seem to have lost all ability to select text here. So just maybe it's a good time for a sip of water. All right, so I think this has taken a little longer than I wanted. I'm going to try to close this out and then reopen it and see what happens here. Let's see if I can force close it. But I'm not sure what's going on. Not taskbar. I want task manager. And that's just live for you. That's Storyline and task. All right, let's just try it one more time and see what's going on there working. Sorry about that, folks. That's just, sometimes that happens. So hopefully this doesn't continue. But again, that's just live. Been here before. not the first time that's happened. So let's just pull up Storyline again, and then we'll see if we can do that. But I was just going to run AI Assistant Spelling and Grammar on that text real quick to see if there's any problems with it. But again, that's the reason we're doing that is simply just to ensure that the writing is as clear as possible. The benefit to that is that it's just going to make it that much easier for AI Assistant to get in there. So we open this. I believe this should all have the same in the same paragraph. And let's try selecting it one more time. There we go. And we would just say fix spelling and grammar. Probably no problems here. I can say replace selection, and everything still looks good. All right, so that's it. Okay, let's just say that we're ready to translate the course. Now, before we get in there, why is that below? I want that above my ribbon. There we go. Before we just go and localize the course, the one thing we would want to do also is publish a review and then go through the entire review process. We want to make sure the course is right. We don't want the validators, the people going through our language, to have to go through the entire course and then catch things like buttons not working, variables not tracking correctly. So your normal process, your normal development process still needs to take place before you localize the course, right? You've got to get that course perfect before your validators come in. They'll still find things for language, but they shouldn't be catching any of your technical functionality type issues. So what I would do is I'd publish it to review. I would assign my reviewers, let them go through the course, make the updates in Storyline, and get the course just as ready as you would if you were going to publish it directly to your LMS. So that review step is important. But let's say that we've already gone through the review. Probably haven't, because I can see I've got some accessibility issues down here that would need to be addressed. But at this point, we would just save our course, and we're ready to localize and then get this course into the hands of our validators. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to come up to the file, and we choose localization, and we still have access to the old school way, the original way, the XLIF and Word translation. So you could still export to XLIF or Word or import an XLIF file in. But we don't want to work that way anymore. We're going to work with translating the course. So here we go. We could translate the course, and we choose our source language. So that's the language that your course was actually developed in, English for me. And then we just select our languages. Now for here, let's say we want to do Spanish, and we have the different variations of Spanish. Let's say I'll do Spanish Mexico, because I love going to Mexico. It's very close to us here in Arizona. And let's say we'll also do Hebrew, so you can see what the right to left languages look like. And then maybe, let's say German, because I was in Germany last month. All right, so there's my 3 languages. I have those 3 languages selected. You can come down, you can see right here we have 3 languages being selected. And then here's our glossary. So I have the default example glossary, or I can choose Articulate Company Glossary, which is what I'm going to do. So this means that even though you can set a default glossary, the default when we set it only just applies to whatever you see as in the initial glossary. So if you're mostly working on your company projects, then to put your company project as the default glossary. We have language formality, and so what this is doing is telling AI how to adjust the tone of the voice, how it uses pronouns. Not every language supports language formality, but if it does, then you can choose automatic, formal, or informal. I'm going to keep it at automatic. I always prefer to do that first time just to see kind of what it looks like. How does it translate? If you were to rerun translation here, let's say you didn't like the way the automatic worked and you wanted to specify formal, because you're still translating the same course, it's not going to take any credits. It's not going to subtract any credits as long as you're staying with the same languages. If you add a new language, then of course that's going to use another credit. But I'll just keep it set to automatic, and that's it. That's all I have to do. I'm just going to click translate, and that's just going to take a couple moments here to translate, and then we will take a look at what that's going to look like. And that's it. Didn't take too long. So a couple things here. We can view the project languages, or we can take a look at layout issues. And this is what I was mentioning when I first started. Those layout issues, there's some things if we do ahead of time, then it'll help correct the issues. So let's take a look at our layout issues real quick. I'm going to click layout issues. And what we mean by layout issues is that some languages just take up more characters, use up more characters and space than other languages. So let's take a look here. So what this becomes for you as a Storyline developer is sort of your checklist. It's like a QA checklist for accessibility. So when you publish a review, your normal process internally probably has checklists that you use to follow for functionality, grammar, and design and consistency. Well, this is the localization checklist. So you can see right here, scroll bars have been added to the shape on main title, and it's telling me on the welcome screen. Now it's also affecting two languages. It's affecting German and Hebrew. So if I jump in here real quick to the German, it'll take me to this. I'm just going to move this off to the side, and you see what happened. So notice how the title is wrapping, and all automatically those scroll bars have been added. I can also, if you look up top, I'm going to come up here, and I'll switch to the Hebrew. That one looks okay, looks fine. And then if I look at Spanish, that one sort of looks okay, but it's telling me that it's not. And then if I look at the original English. So here's something to keep in mind. Any change I make to the size, color, or font of this text, it's going to affect all the languages. Even though everything's contained in one story file, it's all going to share the same properties. So one of the key things that you're going to want to do if you're preparing ahead of time for language translation is right-click your text boxes, and you can set this up default in the slide master, which is highly recommended. But this is going to go against a little bit about how we've taught this in the past. And that is, if I select text box, by default, we want it to expand height or to add the scroll bars. Well, we actually now want to work with more fixed sizes because we don't want to see the scroll bars. So even though we have to choose one of these, fixed size is going to tell us that we're going to make the text box a little larger to accommodate for different languages so that we don't get the scroll bars. Scroll bars are not desirables because we start to see things like, click close, we start to see things like a text wrapping on new lines or text being cut off. So I'm going to make this bigger, and notice how there's extra space right there. Now I probably should design this and think about the overall look and feel a little differently, but I'm making it bigger, and notice now that first welcome screen is missing. I just corrected the issue. So this kind of works like what we do with the accessibility checker as well. So it disappeared from my menu. I'm just going to close this. I'll show you where we can access that again. And then if I come up to a different language, we'll say German, and I'd probably want that to be like that. So now notice how I resized it, made it wider. If I come back up to English, it still looks fine. And if I come down to Hebrew, now we'll talk about some things we can do for right to left languages, but right now I'm just going to leave it and worry about, keep it here, and we'll say Spanish. Okay, so everything looks good. But I want that fixed size. I want to right click the text boxes. I could even set it as the default text box. But what I want to do when I format these, format shape, is work with fixed sizes and then to add extra space to allow for the extra characters that you see. Now, if I go to View tab on the ribbon, and then we have the layout issue finder, so we can always pop that open. But you're going to need to go through and make these changes. Majority of these changes you see are going to be those text box issues. So we'll look at one more right here. Let's see, 1.1. I'll just click the next one and see. So we'll go to German and see what we have here. So it's another title. You can see, if I come in here real quick, see the little scroll bar right there. So again, these are the changes that we need to make. And maybe when you're first getting started, you're going to have to come in and retrofit your courses like this. Maybe if I just stretch it all the way across and center it, it'd be better. Yeah, that's probably going to fix a lot of issues. You're going to have to do a lot of fixing. But as you go forward and you start to build your new courses, you're not going to have those problems because you're going to have this in the back of your mind saying, okay, I need to accommodate, maybe not all of my complicated layouts are going to work if I know I need to localize my courses. So you're thinking about this as you design the new courses. Let's see how Spanish looks here. So everything's going to be okay now. I gave it more width. Center aligned, it actually works really well because then you avoid a lot of that awkward wrapping. And German, I think we need to check. Yeah, so there's that. But that's what I'm going to do and I probably would want to come in here and make sure it's also set to fixed size. Oh, it's unfixed size already, so that was already set. Okay, so that's the kind of the general issues that you're using to fix these courses. I'll jump back into English, and now I'm ready to publish this course to review. So all I've done now is corrected the course. I'm still editing. It's sort of like a second round of QA for your course. Let's do a quick save right here. and then I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to publish it up to review, and then we'll be able to start the validation process where we get this in the hands of our external language experts to go through and look for all the issues that, making sure the translation was correct. AI is going to do about 95%, 96%, but there's still going to be a few nuances that you need to make. But again, just to reiterate, if I haven't been clear with that, I saw some questions about it earlier. Hopefully they got addressed, but I want to hit this. This is all one storyline file. I don't have multiple files right here in my project file. I'm still working in one story file, but all those languages are now contained in here. So the storyline file is a little bit larger than what we'd normally see, but we have everything in a single file. So let's publish this course up to review. Now we'll see mostly the same looking window that we're used to seeing. I have my accessibility issues. I should have addressed those, but this is an accessibility session. I have my languages. You can see 4 languages. Maybe I don't want to publish all of them. Maybe I just want to do a couple of them. You can check or uncheck the languages you want to include. I'll go ahead and just include all of them. And then obviously we have the project file right there. And do we want to publish the entire project or maybe just scenes or slides? Depending on how you're working, most likely you're going to have everything finished before you want to publish it. So I'm going to publish this to review. It'll take a couple moments because it's got to publish 4 different versions of the course and then upload 4 of those. But once it gets up there, then we'll be able to then see what it looks like in review. We have a little different review layout, a little different review interface for it, and then we'll be able to assign folks, jump in and make those edits. So we'll just give this a minute. Probably gonna take a minute to just go ahead and maybe get a cup of coffee or refill on tea. I'll have a glass of water real quick, and we'll just let this run its course real quick. Okay, cool. So here we go. We have our course published successfully to review. You can click the drop down and jump directly to a specific language. You can copy the link if you want to copy the link and then share it directly with one of the courses. I'm just going to click View Project and let's see what it looks like. I'll start with English and then we'll take a look at the course. But at this point, essentially, we're ready to bring in our experts, meaning bringing in the validators. So this is the English course. I can jump into the German course, and these are all translated automatically, and so they're in their languages. And the course, just like anything in review, it's going to work the same way, meaning that the course is going to, all the navigation controls, or if you have custom navigation like we do here, that's all going to work just really as it will as a final course published to your LMS. You can see the right to left languages have been translated, and then finally our Spanish course has been translated. Now what you don't see here is I'm going to pop open my sidebar that wasn't open by default here. So expand this, and this is the kind of the magic of localization. So what we have here on the left and the right is the English term, the original, and then the Spanish translation. Now, what your reviewers are going to do is they're going to go through here, and they're just going to make changes directly to the translated column. So they don't have to download anything. And watch this. So this is my title right here. I don't speak Spanish, although my family does. You think I would know it if I said, I'm just going to type something here, updated title in Spanish. Notice in my storyline file, that text is being automatically updated. So when I get the course back, right, this would be what the reviewer would be doing. I'm going to get the course back and I'm going to see the changes, and I can then import those and overwrite the changes. All of these changes are going to happen in real time on the course. So your reviewer is essentially acting as a storyline developer who's modifying all of the text. Now they'll be able to, I'm going to revert this just because that doesn't make sense for me. So I'm going to revert that, reset that. And what they do is they just go through the course. If everything is fine here on the slide, and notice how the title and the UI has also been translated, they would just mark the slide as validated and they continue going through the course. And they can also use this as their progress bar. So right now we haven't had any, 25 of 25 slides need to be validated. We can jump to any one of the slides automatically, and then they can interact with the course that way as well. So they can use the drop down, or they can go through the course just like they would. This is really helpful because you may have some locked navigation, and the reviewers want to be able to jump around and see what that course looks like. You can see obviously the title here should have been updated as well with that fixed text as well. You have a couple options here for searching, so we can search for certain terms and then replace. So let's say that your reviewers find a specific term that they're always changing. They can search for that word, and then they could even do a find and replace automatically to make that global change. They also have some filters here where we can look at imported edits only. We haven't made any edits whatsoever, so nothing really here is going to help. But after you've had the validators go through, you can use that as a way to look at any of those outstanding edits. And then we also have we have the translation tab, which is new. But let's say that they want to add some context. Maybe the images are maybe culturally not the best fit, right? So they want to make suggestions. Well, they can do that just like they would in review, add a comment, and it'll be added here, and they can give additional direction. Most of what they're focusing on, obviously, is the text translation. But if they wanted to add a comment and they maybe wanted to add another image to use in place of that, then they could do that as well, just like a regular reviewer. All right, at this point, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and request a review. So I would come up here to request review, and I'm going to assign this to a validator. So real quick, this is probably the number one question at this point. Your validators don't need to have an Articulate account. In fact, most of them probably won't. They will be professional language translators who work with a variety of projects. So let's say david@ok.com. So that's just a separate account. I will add my email. We can add a message. Please validate this course, anything like that. And then if you want to set a due date, you can do that as well. That'll actually make it easy for them. Let's just give them till the end of the week. That'll give you a way to track what's outstanding. You can assign multiple validators to a single course, or you can go through it one by one and assign it that way. So I'm just doing one validator here. I'm going to go ahead and send that request, and now this course is up. You can see up here, it's in review. So I need to just really do nothing with this course until my Spanish validator completes the course. So give me a moment here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as the separate user and be able to pull this open. So just a second here. What I want to do is get that email. So I'm waiting for the email. All right, so I just need to log in. So what I want to do is show you that process, what this is going to look like from the validator's perspective. So yeah, here we go. So here's the email, and basically it's going to say, I didn't load the external content. Dave A has requested your review on CompStar Employee Health, and then they're going to click this button and go directly to the course. So I'll pull this over here. And I need to just bring it over. Let's minimize this. So I'm in a separate browser. I'm actually working now in Safari on my Mac. And so this is what they're going to see. So welcome language validator. You can go through a little quick how-to. I kind of walked you through each of those, but this is what they'll see. So they get a little tutorial on what this process looks like, the validation process, going through each of the slides and then marking, validated as they go through it. And then when they finish, they'll be able to do it. So now this is what the validator sees. Notice that they don't see all the other languages off to the side, right? Like I do back here. This is my course as the storyline developer. But right here, this is what the validator is going to see. I'll make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to cover. And they're going to go through. So if they make any updates here, updates, and then updates to, and I'm just making changes real quick. Notice how it changes right there. It changed down here on the button. And then I say, okay, that's validated. And how was your experience? Well, so far it's good, but I don't have time for a survey. And then I'll go to the next slide. And this is what the validator is going to do. So I'm just going to start to menu. I'm just adding some changes here. And the reason being is that we want to be able to see what these changes look like. If at any point, if they go too far, part 2, they can always click the little reset text and it goes back to the original AI translation. What they also have here is notice how any of these that have been translated, there's this little icon here that shows that it's been edited. So anything that doesn't have that hasn't been edited, and then they go through and they can make all those changes and mark validated, and they can just go through the whole course, mark validated. So I'm just going to mark all these validated. Maybe I'll make a couple changes in here, some extra changes one by one, and just so we can see what these changes look like. So you can see mark validated. I think I didn't mark the previous one validated. And go through one more time. Now, if they need to reopen it, maybe they came back to it and they saw there was a change, they could always come back down and reopen that validation as well, and that just starts open and they go through the process. So they just have to go through and make some additional edits. Mark validated, next, and then make some more changes. Validated. Just about it. One more, a couple more, next, and mark validated, and then validated. All right, so that was very quick validation. Nothing here. Mark slide validated for my results, and so on. There's so many questions in here. Okay, I think that's the last of them. All right, if they wanted to quickly go through, they could come up here and say finish review. And when they finish the review, that's going to really close out for them. The course has been validated. I'll receive an email as a storyline designer who owns and manages this course, and they are essentially finished. If I come down here, it's completed, and they could always reopen this if they wanted to come back in and make additional changes. So get rid of that, and if I refresh this now, I should start to see some of those changes that indicate that it's been completed. And let's come back over here. I'm just going to come back to my initial part here. Now, if I'm working here in my review dashboard, notice how it shows me these that it has been translated into 3 languages. If I pop this one open, notice right here we have review complete. And I can walk through, use this filter now, and I can look for unimported edits. So unimported edits means I haven't made these changes yet in Storyline. So I can go through slide by slide and validate those changes. So this might be that second phase. You might reassign the course to another translator to validate those initial changes. But I can see right here, because I turned on this filter, not this one, I'm looking at only the unimported. So it means I haven't imported these back into Storyline. So now I need to go back into Storyline and bring those changes back in here. So let's just toggle over to Storyline, click close, and I'll do a quick save just to be safe and see what those changes look like. So to import the changes, we're going to come back up to our file and we go to localization, and then down here for Spanish, I moved my cursor too fast, localization, and these are my languages. I can come down to Spanish and notice right here there are 8 changes. So if I most likely I've closed everything out. It took a couple days for the validator to make those changes, so I don't have review open. I could go ahead and just pop open that page real quick, or I can import all of those suggestions. By doing that, it's going to make the changes to the slide, and now my course has been updated and is ready to publish to my LMS. Now, one thing we have here, and we'll talk about this when we look at some of the customizations. If for any reason you needed to separate this translation as a separate project file, probably not so important with the Western languages, but like the right to left, you may find that the changes, you're just making too many changes in the course and you want to save it as a separate translation file. You can do that. And when we look at some of the customizations, I'll show you why. So I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to say import all those suggestions, applying those translations. And then I made a few changes here. We can go quickly look at those. But that's how easy this process is from start to finish. You build your course like you normally would. You get the course reviewed, and then you assign a validator to go through the course. And they're essentially doing the work for you. They're making the changes live. They're not having to make that separate document where you have to bring that back into Storyline and go through all that. So just give this a second here. So what it's doing is pulling in those translations from the published course in review. Okay, that is it. If I jump into the slide, there we are. I still have my layout issues. We should have done that, right? We looked at that at the very beginning. We would have wanted to go through and make those changes, but we're pretending like we did, so we're pretending not to look at this. Import results, Spanish, 8 updates, 8 changes to made. And if I then come in, congrats on your localization course. And then if I look at some of the changes here, oh, I need to look at the Spanish version. So drop down menu, come down to Spanish. That's the one we just worked on. And you can see the text I added, updates, and then updates and things like that are already added. So that is the process. And then I would just want to publish this to review. But before we do that, I want to look at a couple customizations that you can do for language-specific media, whether that's text images, text, audio, video, or graphic type images. So I know we made these changes here. You can see the part 2 and so on. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to jump into the Hebrew course, and some things we might want to look at here for ways to customize. Well, actually, I'll do this in English, and then I'll switch over for it. But one thing we might want to do is add icons or visual graphics that are specific to each language. So if I come up here, I think I might have, no, maybe I didn't import them. So let's do this. I'll do View, Media Library, and I'm going to bring in some little flag icons. So just Media Library basics right here. I'm going to import some pictures from files. And then we have our flags. So I'm just going to bring these in right here. Just some graphics to use. I'm going to add them. And then what I'll do is I'm going to put let's just put a couple of these in here, a picture from Media Library. So what I want to do is just indicate the course that we have. So where is it down here at the bottom? USA. That's a really big version of it. I'll keep it kind of big so it's easy to see. But what I want to do is, based on the language we use, I'm going to swap out a graphic. So let's call this one icon flags. So in states, I'll come in here. I'm going to add a new state, and let's just add new state, and we'll call this one USA. And I'm going to keep it because that way it's easier for me to work with the states because it has the name of the country. We'll call this one Spanish. Well, we'll call it next. Actually, I don't know. I think my Spanish might be Spain flag. So I'm going to say Spanish. That might have been something I should have done. I would replace this with a picture from Media Library. And I think I did do Spain and not Mexico. So we translated it to Mexican Spanish, but my only icon is for a Spain Spanish. But just pretend like that's what we're supposed to do. And then I'll do one more here for Hebrew. Replace that. Okay. So this is basic storyline. We're just adding graphics to the slide, but I want to show you a special trigger that we have that only works for translated courses. Right? Okay. So we have custom graphics. I'm only going to do 3 of them right here, but we only want to show one of those graphics based on the localized language. So here's what it looks like. So we're going to say, change the state of our flag graphic. So change the state. And this is storyline basic. Icon flags will say change it to USA when the timeline starts on the slide. Timeline starts on this slide. If, now look over here, we have a new condition, language. You're only going to see this if you localize your courses with Articulate Localization. So we'll say language equals English, right? Because I still want to accommodate for that one. And so this will change the flag icon based on the translated language. Awesome. So with that, I can copy it. So I can just right click and choose copy and then paste it. And then now I'm going to say change the flag to, we'll say Hebrew if the language is Hebrew. And then we paste it again. And then we'll say change it to Spanish if the language is Spanish Mexico. All right. So now, based on the language that we're looking at, we should see these change. So if I come in here to Hebrew, and I were to preview the slide in Hebrew, there we go. So now we have the specific flag, and if I can jump down here real quick, and we did Spanish. Yeah, and there we go. Pretty cool, right? So you can add and customize graphics that way. You can do far more than that. We could have slide master graphics. So if you had images on the slide master and you wanted those to change, you would just add these types of triggers to the slide master. So if you had background images that you wanted to show, so maybe this background image had a different, something cultural for each country, you could make those changes. Now we can also do some additional changes here with, let's say, thought I had some audio. So let me bring in, go back to English. Do we not have, I think we do have something here. Let me go to story view. I know I have some language files in here, right? So here's my narration. Now what I can do is if I've translated this into different languages, I could come in and let's say we'll come into Spanish and I'm going to replace this audio. So just come in here, right click the audio file, and then I can see right here, replace audio Spanish from file. So I have these welcome files that have been automatically translated, so I could use text-to-speech to generate those, but I'm swapping these out, and these are going to be specific to the actual language. So replace audio English, audio from file, and then I'll go grab that specific Spanish version of this file, audio file. So desktop, Articulate Localization, audio, and there's my Spanish, right? So you can see I the different languages, so replace. And that is going to be unique to this particular file. Now, for videos, we don't have that kind of replace feature yet. If we had a specific video like we do, I think on this one, what I would want to do is get, the captions here will be translated. So if I'm in Spanish and I select the video, we should see the captions translated. Options, manage captions. But the actual video itself is still that original. You can see the captions have been all translated as well. But if I wanted a Spanish version of this video, right, maybe there was something specific, then I'd want to do something like new layer, and I would call this one, Spanish video. And then just like we did before on the base layer, we drop that video in on top of this, just cover it up or something like that, or you could put the video on each layer. So this would be the Spanish video. Right? We could just add a trigger right here that says when the timeline starts, if the translated language is Spanish, then show the Spanish layer. So something like this. Show layer, Spanish video, which is that Spanish video layer when the timeline starts on the slide if, and again, we have the language condition because we've translated the languages. If the language is Spanish, then show that particular slide layer. So that video is going to appear. So we don't quite yet have the option to swap out the videos like we do with the audio, but that is going to be a really easy way to manage each of those files. I keep getting all the way over here. Let me come back over here. Right, so with the audio, we can swap that out for each language. So I did that for Spanish, and I would want to do that also for German. Now the last thing here is you may want to find that like the right to left languages, if you hadn't built your course thinking about those different languages, meaning you kind of designed your courses in the normal way, which is more right to left or left to right type course, you may find this is a little bit more work. But if you only had a few changes that you wanted to make, so for example in the Hebrew, notice how the flag is positioned right here. What I could do is open up my states, edit the states, and then select Hebrew, and then just move this one over, right? So I'm just changing the position of that particular file, right? So we would see it over here. So that works right there. But then we have things where maybe the text and everything should be on over here on the right and not all on the left. You can do something with the layout. So just like we did before, we could create a separate layout. I could duplicate this layout, and I'd call that one, Hebrew. But I need to just mention that if you're doing this for every slide, then it's going to be better to save this as a separate project. So everything would be moved over. Just select everything right here, and you're redesigning it a little bit. Oh, I think that's locked on the bottom rectangle. Yeah. So I'm going to move it over. Right, and then we could just set the default state of this to Hebrew anyway. So it's all over there, and then we'd probably want maybe the button being centered is fine. So for one slide, this isn't going to be a lot of work, and then the image just needs to move over, and we would do the same thing, show layer Hebrew if the language is Hebrew. One slide or two slides is not a big deal. If you have to do this for every slide, I wouldn't work like this. It's too much. I think you're going to do too much work with all those extra triggers. This is a perfect example of where coming into localization, Hebrew, save translation as and save it as a translated story file. So save it as a separate story file that's translated, and then you rework it over there, and you don't have to worry about all those extra triggers. You have those options. Again, if you're going through your course and it doesn't look like it's going to be that much work, but then again, the menu's all over here, so maybe that needs to be on the right. It makes more sense to rebuild it at that point. Yeah, you lose the benefit of keeping everything here together in one file. However, adding all the extra triggers, adding separate layouts above that's going to be more work probably in the long run, as opposed to just modifying the existing file that way. So that's your decision, as a course designer, what makes the most sense for you in terms of that trade-off of what's quicker and easier versus having everything consolidated in a single storyline file. All right, so our last part really at this point is, let's say that we've gone through all the languages and these have all been translated as well, the German and the Hebrew, validated. We're just going to publish this to our LMS. So this process is going to be the same. The question that you'll have is, and this is really going to depend on your LMS, and that is, do we publish a multi, let me come down here to LMS. Do we publish it as a single package or separate? So what does that mean? What it means is, if your LMS supports multi-languages, the entire course is published as one file, and there will be a drop-down option for learners to be able to select their particular languages. That's actually really helpful because learners may, maybe English is their second language, and they're taking the English course, but then they want to toggle over to maybe the Spanish course just to see additional context. They can actually move back and forth between the same course in different languages and still be tracked as that single course. If your LMS doesn't support single package containing, and most do, most modern LMSs will support this. It may just need to be enabled with your LMS, so that's something you're going to need to figure out with the LMS administrator, or you publish as separate packages. So essentially what this would do is publish the course 4 times, an English version, a Spanish version, German, and Hebrew version. Or you could do single if you know it supports it. So I'm going to publish to Reach to show you what it looks like. Reach doesn't have that option because it is only a single file published, which is really nice. So all the languages will be contained right there. We don't have any submissions yet. To make this a little bit faster, I'm only going to publish German and Spanish because that's what we worked with. But the courses would all publish the same, all the languages right there, and any of the default settings right here. So I'm going to click Publish. This is going to send it up to review. It'll just take a moment, and then we can see what this course looks like when we're not to review, sorry, into Reach LMS. So if you had your own LMS file, own LMS, this is essentially what the same process would look like. I'm just going to show you what it looks like in Reach. All right, cool. Here we go. We could copy the link if we wanted to send that to someone, or we can just quickly jump into Reach real quick and see what the course looks like. Now it's not published yet, right? So if you know Reach, it hasn't been published, but we can view the course real quick, the latest submitted version, and what we'll see here is our course. And because Reach supports that it only supports that single package file, we can toggle between the courses when we go through it. And right now we're just at the first slide. Let's publish it, actually look at it when we publish the course. So I'm going to publish the course, library visibility, I'll turn it on, and then we can just add it to the default library. So when I publish this and then I take the course, I'll be able to see that as a single file. So enroll learners, me, that's good. And then if I come over here to learn, there's my course. And so when I get to this, I can see launch course, but before I do that, you can see I can choose the specific language because it's all a single course, and I can choose to take it in the language that I prefer. So if I load this up, now I'm seeing my course here, pop this open, and I can go through the course, and you can see how it retains my progress. All right, cool. All right, folks, that is it. There's still so much more I'd like to talk about with this. Please do this. If we didn't get to your questions, I know there was a lot of questions here in the session. Just follow up with us in eLearning Heroes, and we'll be more than happy to answer your question. We want to make sure you get the support that you need. We did a really good job at localization. It does a fantastic job. This was all storyline. We're going to do a separate session just for Rise. But again, just so you know, you'll get that recording tomorrow morning, so we'll send that out. You'll get access to it. And again, if you have any questions along the way, please just jump into eLearning Heroes, and we'll be more than happy to help you out. Thanks so much to my moderators. I know you have the tougher job when we do these sessions because there's so many folks in here. So I appreciate all your help answering the questions. And again, thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.